guys are awesome. I just spent the last 3 hours with Dr. Robert Lyons, who I believe is the most important scientist alive on the planet right now. And we just recorded a series of video interviews, and this is perfect for our topic of networking because if you guys have followed me on social media, you'll see that in the last couple of years, and I don't say this to boast, I say this because I want to show you by teaching from example. I was with the Queen of Malaysia and some other leaders, like monarchs of countries in Africa and Southeast Asia, and I have no business hanging out with these people who have infinity money. If you've ever been around heads of state, the kind of security they have, the kind of way that they live, and the way that that happened for me, I'm a nobody, is that I was friends with a couple other people. Then I met Dr. Lyons. Dr. Lyons is a physician who was helping the Queen help to recover from a stroke that she had. She wasn't able to walk or talk. And so we flew to Kuala Lumpur to meet the Queen and have a celebration party. And she invited her other friends who were the leaders of these other countries. And we spent the whole week partying because that's what monarchs do, right? Kings and queens, they don't have to work like the rest of us. They don't have jobs. They just, then it's almost, if you've ever been around these kinds of folks, they just kind of hang out. And that first night, we had dinner that started at 7 p.m. and it went until 2 a.m. And we were singing karaoke, having a great time. She would just snap her fingers and the servants would come and you could have whatever you want. I'd never seen that kind of thing before. And we were walking through the royal palace and everything that was yellow, I was told, was solid gold. And I thought, holy moly, what do these people, what do they do? What do they want? I remember having lunch the next day with the other lady, and she owned most of downtown. So I was staying in one of her hotels, all five-star hotels. And she wasn't boasting, but she was saying, I'm looking at opening up another hotel in London or another one in Paris. What do you think? She's asking me, and I'm thinking, what do you mean? I have no idea. I don't own any hotels. I don't own, billions of dollars of property in what's now downtown. But the point of this is that it's proximity. And by being in the room with these other people, they all assume that I'm at the level that they're at because we're with other businessmen. The guy who we had dinner with tonight, I'm not using this to boast, I just want to show you this key concept, was the guy who owns the majority of the universities and the hospitals and the construction companies in Southeast Asia. And because we're with him, and then Richard Ling, who's the coconut water billionaire, right? If you drink coconut water or whatever, it's mostly going through his plants that process all that, right? It's being around these people that gives you access to these other people. And simply proximity, you don't have to be intelligent. You don't have to be super hardworking. You don't have to be really brilliant. You have to be a little bit lucky. But the main thing I wanted you guys to see is that networking comes from the people that you know that introduce you to other people, and that warm connect is everything. And I messed up when I started networking because I didn't know. I'm just some Asian guy who didn't speak English and was good at math. I thought you had to impress people. I thought you had to boast about accomplishments that you had or show how intelligent you were or give lavish gifts or sponsor a party or things like that. I found that none of that stuff was necessary because if you do any of that, the people that are around you are going to think this guy's trying way too hard. Like, why can't these other people just, why can't these folks just relax and be normal? And if you need to make a connection, you just ask for it. If you need something, people will know. Well, they'll ask you, what do you need? And I'll say, well, I need a connection to so and so. Oh, that's cool. I know so and so, and they'll right on the spot text you. I was with Brad Lee. What was it? A couple of years ago, we were in his office because we were creating some courses together, and I think I mentioned something about Grant Cardone, and he said, well, sure, why not? Let me just send him a message. And he pulled out his phone and, called up Grant Cardone on the spot. So us three had a quick little chat. I thought, wow, that's really cool. I was with Barry Habib, who's this mortgage guy, really well known in the mortgage space. And I mentioned how I wanted to, I wanted to interview Tony Robbins because of some of the mutual connections that we have and some of the courses and whatnot that we're putting out there. So what does he do on the spot? He calls up Tony, and Tony replies. I'm thinking, how can you do that? I mean, I figured it would take me years and years and years to make that kind of connection. But because of proximity, because you honestly care about a few of the key people, not just because you're trying to say like who knows so and so, but these people naturally will introduce you to all these other sorts of people. And look at Tom, for example. We have Tom Hawkins, who's right there in the first row, followed by the speakers. Look at the proximity that he's had with other people that we know that are mutual friends, where he otherwise wouldn't have had. Right? It's all proximity. It's all because of what's called a weak connection. So in social network theory or social graph theory, a weak connection is a friend of a friend. And you might have 400 friends, but each of those have 400 friends, which gives you 16,000 weak connections. So you think about proximity, where you've heard people say you're the sum of the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with or whatnot. That's what we're talking about. So think about who you spend the most time with. Think about what it is you explicitly want, because if you're not clear on who you want to meet and what your vision is, and hopefully that vision is bigger than you, then your network can't do the work for you to make these kinds of connections. I knew subconsciously that, and I started to broadcast explicitly, that we're helping a lot of doctors because we're helping healers heal. Doctors, dentists, chiropractors, naturopaths, and that has brought me into contact with the top dentists and the top doctors and all this, who of course know the top in the other professions, and that's how we met these other folks. So it could be Dr. Lyons is an oxygen physiologist, or Dr. Glenn Vo. You may see him in these rooms. He's got an orange head in the background too. He's the top dentist out there, 32,000 dentists that follow him. He's a successful dentist. And then that just creates snowball momentum. Then if you don't have that, if you might think, oh, I'm not a networker, I'm not a good talker, I don't have this kind of connection, you could start just like me, where you don't know anybody, but you meet folks, you try to add value, you add value before you try to ask for things, and you would not believe how one connection opens up 10 connections and opens up all the other connections. And instead of cold calling or trying to get 15-minute meetings with people you don't know, you'll find your network introduces people to you. I've never had to cold call. I've never had to cold message. I've never had to prospect ever in my life because of this one principle of proximity. And it all started for me in high school, where I went to a private boarding school, Joe Rosemary Hall in Wallingford, Connecticut. And I was around, I didn't know it at the time, but I went to school with Ben Walton, who's the grandfather or grandson of Sam Walton, and these other kids. Bill Harnish was the father of my other friend Jonathan Harnish, and we hang out. We'd go skiing and do other sorts of things, and I didn't realize that I wasn't trying to do this, but I was hanging around the most successful people in Wall Street, or princes of other countries that were going to school at this rich private boarding school, and that opened up so many connections for me that have since blossomed into 20 years later. Some of these people I know have blossomed into other connections, and thus anything I've ever had has been because somebody has opened that door for me. And it's not because I'm a hard worker. I mean, I try to work hard. It's not because like I'm really smart or something. I study hard, obviously. I'm a good Asian student, but it's because of those connections. And I'm hoping for those of us that are here in this room that you see that the good things that you have, especially if you're successful in business, come from those connections. And then the whole thing, it's not, who it's who knows you, or, all that kind of stuff, or not what it's who you know. All of those are just derivatives of proximity, which is being in the place that the people you need to meet are, which then introduces you to other people. So literally, the reason why rich people live in certain neighborhoods is not because all the mansions are there, it keeps out the riffraff. It's because they want to be around certain people. The reason people go to a $50,000 mastermind is because they want to be around certain people. There's a certain qualifier. If I go to a $50,000 mastermind and other people have to pay $50K to get in, well, not just anybody is going to be able to go to one of those sorts of events, right? So I just want to leave that there for you and see, maybe for someone out there, it sparks something in their mind. It changes how they approach where they spend their time, who they spend their time with. A friend I know who's very successful, he told me last week, he said the key is reframing. so that instead of what do I need to do or how do I do this kind of thing, which is what most of us do, how do I do it? What do I do? Instead, change that question to who will do it, or who do I need to know? And when you reframe from what and how to who, you're going to find things change significantly. Hey, this is Dennis in the Orange Head.
Thanks for sharing that, Dennis. It really rings true, and it's just simple, one word: proximity. And it's interesting because what do you think about Clubhouse as it relates to proximity? Because here you do have the opportunity to sometimes be on stage or be next to someone that would be someone who can open up some doors for you, and you do have the opportunity to get their attention by adding something of value, following them, contributing, when they're hearing you contribute, and that can lead to relationships. Arguably, that's how I'm sitting here with you on the stage of the Coachyu show, right? Because of connecting and having proximity through mutual friends like George here on Clubhouse.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Clubhouse it's taken off, but it's also kind of killed itself in some ways because of proximity. And you guys remember when Clubhouse launched, the proximity, the intimacy of being together with other people in the same room and following up, not because you're asking for something, but because you have something meaningful to say or something you want to do to help out. And it's not the same thing as, oh, how can I work for you? Or I'd like to, take you out for a free lunch. That's not providing value. That's really trading someone's time for, $30 meal, right? But what can you do to really add value to other people? Simple. Understand their content, understand what they care about, understand how you can contribute towards, demonstrating that you understand their issue and what they're trying to do, and they will notice. I know a lot of these people that are, I guess you could call them influencers. I'm not one, and it's not even the number of followers you have, but I'm a nothing compared to some of these people. And they get bombarded with messages, but almost all of them, like 99% of those people, are asking for things. But it's so easy to stand out. You would think, oh, but so and so's famous or whatever. It's so easy to stand out when you don't make these ridiculously stupid networking sorts of mistakes, these blunder faux pas things that we see people do. Because all these people, they're just normal sorts of people, right? They just get treated differently. They get bombarded by folks who are asking for things, and then you get, bombarded by so many people. You just like, it becomes like, I guess there's a phrase called being nibbled to death by ducks. So many of these people coming at you. It's insane, right? One of the things I wrote, this is like a pet peeve of mine, that I wrote a blog post about it. I think it was like 6 things that you should never ask Dennis Yu. Like, 1 is an introduction to Mark Zuckerberg. 2 is Golden State Warrior tickets. You cannot believe the number of people that would ask me, "Hey Dennis, can you give me some tickets to this playoff game?" Or, dude, I only get a few of these tickets, and if I'm not going, I'm going to send it to a deserving team member or to a client. Like, I don't know who you are. Why would I want to prioritize you over? Oh, but you have so many other tickets. And I had one guy hit me up. He said, "But I'm a millionaire." Yeah, I know a lot of millionaires, and even if you are or not, that's not the reason. Like, why should I give you tickets to the Golden State Warriors? Oh, because I could maybe introduce you to some of these other people. Like, that's not how it works, bro. Right? I don't even know who you are. Why are you reaching out to me asking for, like, let's at least do something to show that you care about me as a person, instead of like trying to use me for money or tips or connections. So people that ask for stuff like that, or they ask for an investment. Hey, I got a really great idea. Can you invest in my company? Or, hey, can I pick your brain? I have this business idea, or I just need help optimizing my Facebook ads. Can you just go ahead and help me? Like, come on. I want to help as many people as I can. Like, that's why we're here in Clubhouse. It's free. You guys are attending for free, right? But think about how you can do something that shows that you're more than like these other people that are just trying to grab. And I think you do that, you'll stand out so easily from these other sorts of people. Hey, this is Dennis in the Orange Head. I'm done talking.
Thanks, Dennis. I wanted to share. You made me think about that too. If you have the chance to meet someone famous or a celebrity, the way to stand out, in my experience, is to treat them like a person. They crave that. When I was very young, my first job out of college, I produced a talk show on cable TV. This goes back to the early 80s. I'm an old dude. but I got a chance when I was very young in my 20s to meet a lot of celebrities. You know, everyone from Robin Williams, Jane Fonda, Christopher Reeve, and on and on and on. And the thing that always enabled me to connect with them, or anyone to connect with them, was to not treat them like a celebrity, to not gawk at them and get nervous and ask them about the next movie or what's it like being on this, you know, kissing so and so in that movie, but rather ask them about their dog, or you know, talk to them about their kids, or just treat them like you would treat any other person. And almost always they crave that kind of connection because, as Dennis said, they're constantly being bombarded with all these ridiculous requests, or people treating them and gawking at them because there's some, you know, something different than the rest of us, when they're really not deep inside, and they want to just connect on a human level, person to person. And that's always been very effective in terms of networking with someone who is so-called famous. I'm Jeffrey with the red behind me, and I'm done speaking. Back to you, Dennis.
Hey guys, just to be able to practice what we preach, I'm here with Mark Wagner, and he's been my best friend for almost 10 years, and he's a killer software engineer and a problem solver, but more importantly, for the context of this discussion here in this room and Coachyu, he's been able to meet a lot of these sorts of people and see how to do power networking. What's it like? He was with us the last 3 hours doing the filming with Dr. Lyons, who reached out to me. I'm like, why would Dr. Lyons want to reach out to me to go travel to Dubai to meet the crown prince, right? The next guy, the guy who's, you know, going to be king next, you can maybe talk. Mark can talk about meeting Pitbull, where he shut down the restaurant. We got to hang out, but didn't take any pictures. Like, I'd love Mark to introduce himself and share some tips.
Oh, as far as meeting celebrities, yeah, last year was quite a year. I met Warren G, Pitbull, Chance the Rapper, Jake Paul, all these guys. Most of the time, I would say they just have a very aura of chill around them. There's, you know, I can't I can't speak for Malaysian royalty. Only Dennis can speak for that so far, but they haven't had anything to prove in a long time, and it shows.
So, what kind of mistakes do you see other people making because they don't know how to behave around these sorts of folks? Or what kinds of things have you witnessed? How did these sorts of A-list people, and I don't mean the celebrity famous people, I mean the people who really are powerful, right? In the last 3 weeks, we met some people that are totally under the radar, but are ridiculously successful. How do they behave? How do they think? How do we engage with them and not look like idiots?
Ooh, well, that depends so much on the person, but I would say you can expect them to be kind of goofy. They almost don't conform or fit in boxes because they have already made it. So they might just wear whatever clothes they want or act however
Yeah.
they want. But
Talk about Tim. Like Tim's a friend of ours, super under the radar. He sold his company to Google for stupid money and now owns a lot of real estate. So much real estate that he said that the smallest, what did he say?
smallest unit he has is 300 doors. He doesn't touch anything under 100, but 300 is the.
And he wasn't boasting.
Yeah.
What was,
We walked out of the restaurant, and he waved his arm broadly at a sweep of high rises and said, "These are," and he was going to say, "What is it?" So something about their construction, but we assumed he was about to say, "These are mine."
these are all mine.
Yeah, these are all mine. So you can, it kind of inspires confidence because, like, I was working on this one contract, and he told me, you know what, who's that with, and what's happening with that? And he said, you should, for one reason or another, from his experience, you should quit that contract. I'm like, oh, but it's a lot of money, isn't it? You should just let that go because the from his experience, that was no longer going to be not going to be something promising in the future, and I should put my efforts elsewhere. And the next week, I found out that was exactly the case. But I wasn't even in fear of the change because I knew that someone that has been there and done that told me that that was the right way to go. So if you're trying to be someone or be a thing, you find someone who's done that thing. It's so true.
Shout out to also Dr. Dave Toohill. Maybe Mr. Jeffrey, you could make him a mod, and he could share some tips too about power networking. Where we met here in Clubhouse, we've done rooms together, but not only did we do rooms together, Dr. Dave, we hung out in Nashville and we had some meals together. And I took pictures with his guns, which I got a little bit of hate for, holding these machine guns that were, I guess, whatever, loaded or something like that, right? Why would you have guns that are not loaded? And making real connections and doing what we can to actually demonstrate that we care. And we were in, where were we, Dr. Dave? We were in Vegas at some, it wasn't the Win or one of those ones, right,
We were
Danny?
at we were at the Win in Vegas, just brainstorming. I give you an adjustment. There's actually, I think, a picture floating around of me giving you an adjustment at the Win in Vegas.
So what's your power networking tip? You're around a lot of people that are, I guess, rich and famous, influencers or not. What is it about making connections with folks like this, and how do they behave differently than the noobs?
Yeah, you know what, Dennis? It's a great question. I think for me, it's I just don't hold my cards too close. I think that some people would disagree that's a bad idea, but I think I'm always looking for, hey, what's a way to serve this person, and learn from them, and more use every connection as an opportunity to learn versus trying to get something out of somebody else. And so I think that a big thing for me is just really whenever I'm trying to connect with someone else that I think that, would be a good person to connect with, I'm always just thinking about what is something I can do to improve their life without any expectation of return, and really honestly having no expectation of return. I think it just changes the way that people start to perceive you. So that's my, I would say that's probably my power networking tip, is really just, really thinking about, hey, how can I help this other person or this other business and give them a strategy, or, serve them in one way or another, so that either way my reputation with them and the way that they think of me, because in the future, I mean, I think that networking is an ongoing thing. So you're always every action that you take is networking. So those are my thoughts, and thanks for having me, brother.
Dr. Dave, you're amazing. Let me give you guys an example of how to follow up in a way that's meaningful and provides value. So Dr. Dave was giving us, we were talking about Puerto Rico, and he and his business partner were going to go down there and set up their business to avoid taxes and this sort of thing, right? Because when you make enough money, there's a certain point where, I mean, you'll pay taxes, but you want to pay only as much as you legally have to, if you know what I mean. So that's why a lot of people go to Puerto Rico. And Dr. Dave was just generously giving us advice about what to do, and about taxes, and about the rules and other things about Puerto Rico. And what did we do a week and a half after that? Mark and I went down to Puerto Rico, and we're about to fly back in a few days. And Mr. Mark here is looking at buying a 9-unit multifamily, basically an apartment complex that's 3 stories tall, because of the advice that Dr. Dave is sharing. And I find, for me, and I'm curious, Dr. Dave and other folks, what you think, I find that the highest compliment is when other people follow through on your advice. They read that book, like what Tom Hawkins does, or they fly to Puerto Rico and apply that expertise, that knowledge, because it's a form of flattery of being able to do that. And I find very few people follow through on recommendations. And when you see people actually do that, especially like people who they take our $1 a day course and they make 1-minute videos and they see it works, and the 99% of people that don't, I look at that and they say, wow, my hat's off to you. This is Dennis and George Head. I'm curious to see what you guys think.
That was gold.
Hey, Mr. Mark's going to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to say that was gold right there.
Gold is what Puerto Rico? What does that mean? Rich port?
Port of riches.
Yeah. What do you say, Dr. Dave? You should all
No, I
follow
agree.
Dr. Dave.
I agree 100%.
So everyone else here who's a speaker or a moderator, or maybe you have a thought, maybe you're inspired, hit the hand raise button. We're going to do this for a little bit longer. I want to hear. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy who stumbled into finding some things that worked. Let's see what you guys think.
Dennis, do you mind if I chime in here?
Go ahead.
So I actually think one of the things that I had done when I had my business is to listen to other people's advice. So one of the things that I had heard from Gary Vaynerchuk was, if you do this, this, and this, and you send me some information on my podcast, I'll consider you to be featured in my book. And I did exactly that. I did follow his advice. I posted on Musical.ly when it first came out 3 times a day for the entire summer. I got a lot of traction there, and I ended up showing him my results, and he ended up putting me in his book, Crushing It. And I think that speaks a lot to what you were just saying, Dennis, about when someone gives advice and you follow through on it and they see the repercussions of that, they really, it improves the relationship, and it makes them feel good about knowing that their advice actually worked and they can now use you as a use case. And so for entrepreneurs, I think that's really golden.
Thank you so much, Shitra. That was awesome. Who else has a tip?
I'll jump in here for a second, Dennis, if that's all right.
Please do, Charlie.
It's good to see you again, and Dave, good to see you too. Yeah, I think that's awesome advice. One of the other, well, if I had two more points of something that was really worked for me, one is I speak up when I'm confident enough to provide some value, and what I mean by that is there's a lot of people that are hangers on. There are a lot of people that stick around to be in that room. And Dennis, you're totally right about proximity, but part of that proximity is also being able to contribute when you've got something that's going to help. And I can think of more than a few examples of this, and I won't go into some long story, but I've been able to see a lot of success in my career by raising my hand and speaking up in a room full of people where somebody was asking for help and they weren't necessarily surrounded by folks who were terribly motivated to speak out and put themselves out there. And I've been right in those situations, and I've also been wrong. But the courage to stand up and be somebody that is willing to contribute in a room full of folks that are basically there to just mosey everything along speaks a lot. And I've always valued that as well out of people, whether they were right or wrong. If they were wrong and they were humble about it, that's amazing. If they were right and it was helpful, that's amazing. And the other piece was in the follow up. I think the follow up is really key. You know, Dennis, you and I were chatting in a room, I don't know, 3-4 months ago or something. And I said, hey, I had a lot of fun, and you tweeted back at me. And then I was like, we had a small public exchange or in a small private exchange, whatever. But part of that was also just in the now I can see you in a place as somebody that's it's fed back and vice versa. I think it means our interactions can mean so much more to somebody else when they're reaching up and we're reaching down, and vice versa. I can't tell you how many times I've lived something that was incredibly important to me, and the other person didn't remember it at all. Like, for instance, Dennis, I don't even know if you remember the tweet that I'm talking about, but for me, it was meaningful. And I've done that for a lot of other people. And I feel like that follow up, that bit of personalization back in the day, used to call it a thank you letter, or sending somebody just an appreciation just for taking an interview for a job. Those types of personal interactions where those connections can be extended are incredibly valuable. And I honestly think that it's one of the most underutilized way of networking, because it's not just about your first impression. I mean, to use digital marketing technique, it's about your stickiness, right? It's about your frequency. All of those things matter. And it has been massive to my career to be somebody that is humble enough to admit when they're wrong, speak up when I think other people aren't necessarily contributing, and to follow up after important meetings to show my thankfulness to those that have been able to reach down. And I tell you, those are my two biggest pieces of advice, and that's what I got to contribute here. Hopefully that helps.
Amen. And I remember that tweet, Charlie. That's what made you so memorable. It's often those little favors, like you said, that don't seem to be anything that end up being something much larger. And one of my favorite things to do is try to do things that are unexpected in a good way, that are serendipitous. For example, people, you go to a five-star hotel, you expect a certain level of service, so that's not out of the ordinary. But maybe after you have dinner with somebody, and then a couple days later, in the mail, which is normally junk mail, they open up a gift and they see socks with their face on it, with a handwritten note from you. That's memorable. That's not something that they would typically see. Even though you could have sent a text, could have sent an email, could have, tagged them on Instagram. But when you do something that is more physical, when something that's more unexpected, so this is so powerful, it's almost like a cheat, a hack, that we created a site called blitzgifts.com. And you can order socks with your friend's face or your dog's face on it. And we've done this thousands of times, and it helps our people build connections. And the beauty is you're also creating jobs in Portland for these moms. And there's also 150 virtual assistants. They're working in the Philippines that are doing the design work, these other sorts of bits. Or if you don't want to do the socks thing because it's weird, you can go to Amazon and use Amazon Prime, where it's free shipping. And there's a bunch of things. Like my favorite thing there is the Amazon, the Andes mints. You guys know, you go to a restaurant and they have those Andes mints. They're delicious. I'd often eat at these horrible restaurants just because I wanted the mints that came with the check at the end. And I'd order a giant tub, 260 count, and include a gift note on, which is free on Amazon and free shipping. And I would say, Jeffrey, I meant to tell you how grateful I am to be a part of Startup Club on Clubhouse, which is that green house you see at the top right above my head. And can you imagine that, right? I meant to say, you get that in the mail, this giant thing on Amazon for $11. It's what it costs to send, free shipping and a gift note. You never get stuff like that. Think about ways that you could do little things like that. They don't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be some crazy sort of thing, but really it's just the thought that counts because it disrupts. It's a pattern interrupt of what they would typically see. Think about,
Dennis,
yeah,
we
go ahead.
call those, Colin, who you know, my partner, we call those a UMOD, UMOD, which stands for Unexpected Moment of Delight.
Yeah. If you can just do one of those things every day, and I know we're all so busy, all these different things that are happening, but that can make all the difference. I know Mark, for example, was helping out this other girl. She was in a difficult situation and lent her $300. And that was a moment in time where, that made a big difference in her life. Just little things like that. I'm not saying give away money. I'm not saying, pay someone's rent. But simple little things. I've heard from other people, you would never know how many people are struggling just to get by, just to not fall apart, putting up a front, acting like they're successful because everyone else is supposedly successful and they don't struggle. So I guess I can't show that I'm struggling because now I'm a weirdo, or what is it? Laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. But simple little bits of encouragement can make all the difference with someone who maybe you don't realize this, but they're so down that they're thinking about ending it all, right? And it's not because I'm some sort of amazing person, but I'm telling you, and I know other people here in this room will agree, there are people who will come up to you afterwards and say, that one little thing you did, kind of like what Charlie said, that one little thing you did made all the difference. And it wasn't even something monetary. It wasn't, because the socks cost like $15 or some $20, something like that. It's because someone actually cared just for a moment. It's not like you had to spend a whole day doing favors for them. It's just like this one little moment, that one little retweet, right? Or engagement is what counts. And that kind of stuff will pay dividends. Some of the people that we've been able to hang out with this last year was because of relationships, the seeds that we planted, 10 years ago. And I'll give you an example. So Mark mentioned that we got to spend all this time hanging out with Jake Paul, right? So we're making all these videos. If you guys want to see, I think next week we can give you a sneak peek. If you want a sneak peek, it's actually not even, I don't think you can buy it yet, but you can go through the interactive experience. If you remember, like Bandersnatch, choose your own adventure kind of stuff. If you go to financialfreedommovement.com, you'll see what Mark and I and a couple other folks put together. The reason why we built this course with Jake Paul, where he reached out and his team reached out, because I didn't reach out to Jake Paul. I'd get probably turned down. I wouldn't have the balls to reach out because I don't ever want to get rejected, so I never reach out. Is because a mutual friend, Dan Fleischman, and also Mark Lack said, hey, the person to talk to build interactive courses and train up people in digital marketing is this guy named Dennis Yu. So you should go reach out to him. And a couple of the other people on Jake's team, when they asked around, so who should we build this course with? They said, oh, you should talk to Dennis Yu. So it's like, oh, shoot. Well, everyone's saying you need to talk to Dennis Yu. Then he must be the guy for building these interactive courses and doing stuff with digital marketing. Okay. But the reason why those people recommended me was because I mentored Mark Lack 10 years ago and helped him build a personal brand. Not like he wasn't already successful, but he became way more successful by being a mentee, using the dollar a day approach and the 1 minute video thing, which we teach and preach and practice all the time. And because he's grown his brand, he then put me on TV and on his show and all this, and teaching all these other people about dollar a day. So now you have these Tai Lopez kinds of people, or real estate investors. They're applying this technique that they heard from Mark Black, and people ask Mark Black, how did you grow your brand on social? How did you do these deals? How did you get this exposure? How did you get to speak on stage in these different places? They're selling all these books and programs. Well, it's because I use a dollar a day technique that I learned from Dennis Yu. So he's always giving me credit. And because he gave me credit, that caused all these other people to be influenced, including the friends of Jake Paul. So then I get a phone call saying, hey, do you want to do this course? Build a course with Jake Paul. I'm like, heck yeah. So then I call up Mark Wagner and I say, Mark, let's go to Jake Paul's place, write the script, film it, load it up into our system, edit the videos, build landing pages and other kinds of sequences. And this creates this snowball effect where one little relationship, you do one good turn for someone else and it results in something you never would have anticipated, which is something that we call the real option. You guys ever heard of a real option? You want to explain a real option?
A real option.
Here,
This is Mark here.
This is Mark.
A real option is the potential for other things to happen. It's basically the opposite of opportunity cost. It's opportunity value. If you go to New York, there's the possibility that you could meet someone or do a deal or walk through a museum or have an experience. But if you don't go to New York, you don't have that option. So it's something in a deeper way. It's something that you can do to get into a second tier that you couldn't do otherwise, right? Like, that's a good example for this. There are certain things you need to do in order. If you didn't have a business before February 2020, you couldn't apply for a PPP loan. So having a business was a real option. It wasn't clear beforehand, but that having that business would allow you to have the loan. But if you didn't have a business prior to that date, February 20th, 2020, then you could never get a PPP loan. So having a business was an option that led on to the potential for that. So things that you can't play unless you've already done this certain thing, you can't play in round 2 or round 3.
So I want you guys to think about this just for a moment in terms of being engineers. So Mark and I are engineers, and us as engineers, we think about networking as this series of interconnected relationships, right? You can almost think of it as objects inside a schema that are connected together. And a real option is one thing that you do that if you didn't do this one thing, it doesn't allow you to participate in the second stage or the third stage. This is not MLM. This is when you, like Mark said, when you build a relationship, when you build a factory. Let's say you build a factory making widgets, right? And it takes you 3 years or 4 years to build this factory, and you're in a competitive market, and you break even or even lose some money. But then all of a sudden, for something that you could never have anticipated, all of a sudden today, there's a new market demand for whatever, right? And it just so happens to be that anyone who has a factory that knows how to make the widget that you're making has now got a 3-year head start on someone else who'd have to start from scratch to produce this new, really popular kind of widget. That's a real option. It's where the second stage of value is not known, but there could be something else that's valuable. So the net present value for our finance friends is equal to the direct NPV plus an indeterminate amount of the real option that's on top of it. Let me give you a real example. So our buddy Brennan Agronoff, who does the face socks and pet socks, he started off doing socks on eBay and sold this stuff out of his garage, made a little lunch money, and then all of a sudden turned into a much bigger business where he was making money during Christmas time because people would order socks for their teams and their moms and things like that. So he was doing 7 figures all during November and December. But then, unbeknownst to anyone else, this coronavirus thing happened. And he switched his sock making thing over to mask printing. He already had the infrastructure necessary to do the mask printing. So then he significantly increased his business because of that. But anyone else who's like, oh, we need to print customized masks or whatever, they would have had to go through the whole factory setup and infrastructure and hiring the people and all these different processes. So I want to see, what do you guys think about the idea of the real option as it ties to networking. It could be because you have a relationship with a childhood friend who went to school with them, and later, they opened up some kind of opportunity. But if it wasn't for this friendship that you had, you never would have known 10 years down the road that it would have resulted in this other kind of deal. Or now this person, this friend of yours that you knew from childhood, like I knew Mark before he became a ridiculously good engineer, and all these other people are hitting him up to build certain kinds of software. So it's almost like you get in early, right? It's like getting into Bitcoin early. It's another way to think about a real option, because it then spawns these other kinds of things. Do you guys take the long-term view on relationships, on projects, and considering what could be a real option, a second or a third stage opportunity that maybe is vague right now, but it's going to put you in position, like Mark mentioned, going to New York? Maybe you don't have a job, or maybe you go there and you work some kind of job or some opportunity that isn't exact, but it puts you in position. It's going 15 north here. We're going to Vegas to the Spice event, by the way. It puts you in position for other kinds of things. Where do you need to go? Where do you need to be that maybe in the short run isn't quite as ideal, but is going to be where people where you need to be in the long run, even if those other components aren't in place.
So, Dennis, to bring it full circle, sort of, isn't proximity a real option? To go back to your earlier point about networking, if you have proximity to people, you don't know where that's going to lead. You don't know what that second stage is going to be. And just by that proximity, doors could open, opportunities could arise that were unexpected. Would you agree?
100%. I'd love to see what our other folks, maybe Mr. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, funny you should say that, Dennis. Speaking about networking and what it means, my goal someday is to meet Dennis in person. We developed a relationship because of Clubhouse. It started out Clubhouse, and because I'm a Chevy dealer that's always wanted to be a marketer, and joined the family business right out of college, and so now as I'm approaching retirement, I'm thinking more about doing digital marketing retirement. So I followed Dennis all around, and I got in one of our weekly groups with Dennis. And one thing I've learned to do is he likes to recommend friends' books. And so I've just made the habit of buying every book that he recommends and read them. And so just one thing that happened, and that because of that, is I also heard a comment I've heard many times in my life but never followed it. Successful people read a book a week or something like that. So instead of spending so much time on social media, now I have a habit of reading a book a week. Partly because Dennis said, you should read this book and you should read that book. And because I respect Dennis, I ordered the book. And one of the books I ordered was a book called The Undefeated Marketing System by Philip Stutz. And I was so excited in reading that book and how it could possibly help me in my business. I filled out the opportunity to do a free audit. And I'm guessing, I don't know why, but Philip Stutz himself decided to get on the call. That kind of surprised me. I'm assuming the reason it did is because when they asked a question in the audit questionnaire, how did you hear about us? I said, Dennis, you referred your book to me. So I'm assuming that's probably why. So the point is that networking can help you meet a lot of good people. But in my case, just as valuable, maybe even more valuable, is that networking with people like Dennis and others that I've met just because I follow him, I'm developing new habits that I probably should have had years ago, but now I'm doing them. And I'm spending my lunch hour, instead of eating lunch, I'm reading my book or doing some devotions, or getting caught up on my book of the week and developing good habits and things like that. So I think that's the other side of networking that's good. It's not just the people you meet, but it's the habits you develop because you're following successful people. So I wanted to mention that.
Amen, Tom. Did you guys hear what Tom just said? It wasn't that he was scouring the internet, looking at book recommendations and watching YouTube videos and filling his brain with as much knowledge as possible. It's because he followed through by connecting recommendations from people that he respects and demonstrating that he's someone who takes action. And so when Philip Stutz sees that Tom bought the book, read it, he's going to show up, partly to honor his fans and partly because he sees that we have a mutual connection. And you would not believe how many things in your career, in my career, are based on those kinds of connections. literally following through on recommendations. It doesn't mean you have to buy their book. It just can be simple things and honoring them that will get those people's attention. Hope you guys are getting value. This is the Coachyu Club where we meet every Thursday at 5 Pacific. Wherever I am, I'm glad you guys are here. We're on the freeway here, going to an event here in Las Vegas. But every week we cover a new topic, and I'd love to hear whatever thoughts you guys have. Maybe Jeffrey, you could talk about the larger infrastructure of the club and the recordings and startup club and what started, what's the impetus behind this.
Absolutely, Dennis. Thank you. Yeah. So the Coachyu show, we call it a show because it is a recurring weekly show, and Dennis is the host, and it's one of many recurring shows on Startup Club here on Clubhouse. And if you're not following Startup Club, as Dennis said earlier, you can click on that green Monopoly house and follow the club, and we'll also quickly make you a member of the club. Usually it takes about a day after you follow to become a member. And we also have a website at startup.club. So if you go to startup.club, you can see all the featured shows and recurring shows that are there. You can sign up for our email newsletter and get notified. And we're going to be adding lots of other assets, including recordings of some of the shows. So it's a great way to connect and keep the community going outside of Clubhouse and learn more about what's going on inside a Clubhouse. And we've got a lot of fun recurring shows like this one tomorrow afternoon, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. We have the Serial Entrepreneur show on Startup Club, where we have lots of different speakers. We've had Vern Harnish on recently, the founder of Entrepreneurs Organization and the author of Rockefeller Habits and Scale Up, and other great speakers. We've got Jack Daly coming in a couple of weeks in Serial Entrepreneur Club, and lots of good things going on Startup Club. So we encourage you to follow us, follow the show. Of course, follow Dennis and anyone else you heard give valuable feedback tonight. It's a great way to connect. And, if you like what someone says on stage, more than likely you'll like the other rooms they show up in. So you want to follow them and click that bell so you know what they're up to here on Clubhouse. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and always thank you, Dennis, for all the great information that you drop here week after week, all for free, all tremendously valuable. And if everyone takes the advice tonight, follow through on recommendations. So there have been a lot of great recommendations tonight, so please follow through.
Amen. And look deeper than the superficial things. It's those connections, often authentic, often imperfect, that cause people to remember who you are. For example, Mark and I are driving to this high-end event of super successful entrepreneurs, and we're wearing tennis shoes, ratty tennis shoes. But I guarantee you, it's just fine. It doesn't matter, because these people, they know you by who you're with, not by the clothes you wear, not even by the car you drive, right? It's if you find that you don't like how you look or these sorts of pieces, don't let that hold you back from being able to make that connection. A lot of people, they won't make their 1 minute video because, like, literally somebody this afternoon said, "Oh yeah, I saw you speak in Salt Lake City and this other place, and I met you, and I drove all the way to this one place for this one conference because you were there." And I said, "That's great. I'm so glad. I'm honored. But where are your 1 minute videos, my friend?" And he said, "Yeah, my fear and these other things." If you don't put it out there, you don't let your network do the work for you. So you just got to be there. And I can't tell you how many important deals I have closed at the pool with almost no clothes on, right? Or late at night when I've got bags under my eyes and I'm not really making sense, but that was the time. You just got to be there. Understand today, it's about proximity. I hope that this was valuable for you, thought-provoking, expert networking tips based on proximity. Of course, giving gifts increases proximity, virtual proximity. Of course, having long-term relationships builds real options, because you never know, one thing may lead to another thing that may lead to another thing, not because you believe in the universe or manifestation, but because you realize that there's a science behind how people connect. There's psychology, just like laws of gravity that govern the mind, just like governs how rocks fall from tall office buildings, right? So I want you guys to think about, who are the people that you can intentionally spend the most time with, people that you know well, people that you know have your back, not people that pull you down, but people that are supporting you, not in a faint praise kind of way, but who are really there for you when things count. And if you do a little bit of culling, a little spring cleaning, I think you're going to find that you're going to have these gems that you didn't realize you had because there was so much clutter. And I'm so glad you guys are here. And the value of someone's personal brand is what other people have to say about you. And I hope that my legacy and your legacy is building up these kinds of connections so that people remember you for not what you said or how smart you are, but the way you were able to make an impact in their lives without necessarily even, asking for anything. So I hope to see you guys next week. Maybe Mr. Mark, a final word?
Value your connections and pay attention to who would send you $2,000 in your moment of need.
$2,000, my friend. I think the average American can't even pay a $400 emergency hospital bill. So that tells you something. All right. So see you guys next week. So awesome we can spend time together. Do good things.